Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to an impromptu video. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's getting through their week in fine fettle. I'm doing okay, thank you very much. Of course, it helps when the weather is glorious, as it is today. It's not hot, but it's very sunny. It's about 11-12 degrees centigrade. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit off the top of my head for my American friends, but nonetheless it's not quite summer yet, but it's certainly giving that impression, and it's much nicer than the rain and all the rest of it that we've had for a while now. To be fair, last few days has been quite nice. I've come to sort of my favourite spot in Bournemouth, really, or near my favourite spot in Bournemouth. It's not down there on the beach, as you can see there. That infamous word, they are preparing the beach probably for the upcoming season by adding some sand, moving it around, whatever. I don't know, I'm not a beach maintenance expert. While that's going on down there, we have our local residents here, some goats, minding their own business. Yeah, they are definitely not really affected by the human world, are they? I was having a conversation earlier today with Sandra about, you know, the world in general and how it affects us and this, that and the other, and just talking about sort of general stuff, like people do. I mean, I'm not like her, but I do pay attention a little bit to the mainstream news, as it were, with a small n, and I do listen a little bit to what they say, what the narrative is and all the rest of it, how they package it, how they sell it to us, all the nonsense stories. And of course, we also both came to the conclusion, and it's a very easy conclusion to come to, that actually, the bigger picture is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with the world per se. It's the human element, right? It's the bits that are controlled by humans, the system that we live in, that we were born into, and how we have to then deal with living in that system. Because you can't just simply be born and just crack on with life without having any some sort of paperwork to back up who you are, some sort of registration process and all the rest of it. From the moment you're born, through your birth certificate, you have entered into a contract with the state, the government, the powers, whatever you want to call them. And that's just a fact. Nothing that exists is here by chance and by design and can exist without being noticed. Everything's accounted for at higher levels, right? So, naturally living off grid, or naturally not having anything to do with what goes on around us in terms of jobs and even things like bank accounts and stuff like that, is absolutely not possible. Not possible at all. I mean, I have friends who have, for example, while we're on that topic of living off grid, I have friends who have tried to live off grid, and whilst they maybe live in the countryside and are self-sufficient in terms of food and even water and maybe even electricity, they still have a foot in the system. They have to. They have a bank account, they still have to get petrol for their car, they still have to buy the odd thing to live, right? You can't get everything from the woodland. There are certain things that you do have to purchase. It's as simple as that. It's one of the things I'll be talking about when I eventually get round to doing my presentation about our recent history and how we've been totally lied to about our backstory. At the end of the day, once humans were around, they would have had to have been up and running systems wise pretty quickly, otherwise you wouldn't survive very long, right? Whether it's transport systems, whether it's communication systems, whether it's, you know, things like food, acquisition, logistics, you know, all that sort of stuff. That all had to be in place, even however basic, but it all had to be in place relatively early on in our existence for us to function as a society or as a civilization at all. Yeah, that's just the way it is. Even today, you can live in relative seclusion, even with the modern technologies that we have at our disposal and our transport. Can you imagine what it would have been like 150 years ago? Let's just say, for argument's sake, it would have been an impossibility to live any kind of sort of, how can I say it, a life of comfort or reasonable comfort, or you know, anything of that nature. Even these guys here are tabbed and accounted for, you know. So, but anyway, over to our right there we have Bournemouth Pier, and if I go down here a little bit just to get the right angle, or the correct angle. An angle, by the way, are two straight lines meeting at a vertex. You can't have a curved surface in an angle, or a curved element in an angle. It's impossible. So when we navigate our Earth, you know, in the oceans and all that sort of stuff, we do what's called elevation angle measurements to the lights in the sky. The ground from which we take those angle measurements has to be flat and level and horizontal. That would be Earth. Over there to our left, just behind that pillar, is Boscombe Pier. And between the two piers is about 1.5 miles. And over in the distance there, right above this wooden bit of fencing pillar thing, is Needles, which is Isle of Wight, and that point there is 14 miles away. And to the right of that, on a clearer day, you'll see a slither of land coming out to, you know, it leans out to the right, and that is the Isle of Wight, the southern part of the Isle of Wight, and that would be 27 miles away. I have done a video about that and did an observational video from a couple of years ago, I think it is now, with my friend Paul, where we went down to Bournemouth Beach with the aid of Google Maps to make sure that we got our distances right and everything else. And in actual fact, you could see the coastline of the southern part of the Isle of Wight from a few inches off the sand from a 27-mile distance. Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, we were just talking in general and sort of lightly philosophizing about, you know, sort of life in general and how this realm that we live in, certainly the human element of it, has all been set up. You know, the Earth itself that we walk upon, the terra firma bit, it's been here way longer than us. Way longer. Obviously, we can all agree on that. But our actual aspect of it, so the human part of it, society, civilization as we know it today, hasn't been around that long at all. And if you give it some thought, that makes sense, logical sense, very, very quickly. And like I said, it's something that I will be talking about when I eventually do get around to do my presentation, which is a nice little segue to explain that for this upcoming Flat Earth Social, I won't be presenting. I've had to postpone, but for very good reason, and that is that I'm seeing my daughter over this coming period, the Easter period. I haven't seen her, or we haven't seen each other in the flesh for 7 years now, for one reason or another, and it's high time, and the opportunity arose very spontaneously. So of course it's something that we're going to do. You know, when certain opportunities happen in life, you have to seize them with both hands. Definitely, because sometimes they don't come around again. It's that simple. But, you know, in the near future, I shall, I'm sure at some point, be talking about what I was going to talk about in the presentation, which is focusing a little bit about how, in my opinion, our backstory, you know, what we regard as history books and all the rest of it, has all been kind of structured, shaped, and brought to paper and then introduced into a fabricated school curriculum in the Victorian period, right? So the school curriculum sort of basically happened straight after the Victorian era came to an end. In terms of dates, that would be 1901. Queen Victoria, as we like to call that person, but I think it's the name rather than the person that's significant, because Victoria is Latin for victory, and people do say, historians especially, that history was written by the victors. Well, I think there's a bit of truth in that title, hidden in plain sight. That's why I'm going to call the presentation "History was written by the Victorians." But that lady was monarch from 1837 until 1901. 1837, interestingly, is also the year, allegedly, this is all according to the mainstream sources, right? Because you can't disprove it, I wasn't around. But allegedly 1837 is the year that the first photograph came to be. So photography, I should say, was born, as it were. And then, of course, in that century, the 1800s, is when everything pretty much came to be. From your first train tracks to, companies and institutions that we know and love today. Especially here in the UK, brands like Cadbury's, for example, chocolates, or brands like Boots, for example, a pharmacy chain, and things like that, just your sort of household stuff that we know and love today. They've all hit around about 200 years old, all of them. So of course it does beg the question, what on earth were we doing for thousands of years if we had none of the normal stuff that makes a society live today, including things like a police force, anything like that, anything like that. The RNLI, for example, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, the chaps and chapesses who volunteer and get out in boats and save people caught up in shipwrecks and stuff like that, all invented in the 1800s. What, we had no need to save people who were drowning before that? Lots of questions that all lead back to the 1800s. Our great literary figures and all the rest of it, who essentially are our gatekeepers, right? Before the times of your influencing days of internet today, or your major influencers, which are your mainstream providers like BBC, or in America it would be CNN and Fox and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't matter. They all feed into the same power structure and the power system that control our world, the narratives that form our perceptions, which form the way we view the world, because that's how we've learnt to view it. Yeah, so of course it's an easy conclusion to draw when you think that, okay, if the same people are in charge of the education and school systems, as are in charge of media, as are in charge of our judiciary and our legislators, etc., 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 then all roads lead to the same place, whatever place that may be. I'm sure there's different words for it, but I think you get my drift. So it's a fascinating topic. Just walking down this road today on East Cliff, which I love so much here in Bournemouth, Boscombe, sort of in between the two. You walk past so many buildings that are half submerged underground, where windows are just peeking above, the path that you're walking along outside the building, and you look at it and you think to yourself, well, you wouldn't have built buildings first and then decided, right, now that we have our buildings, let's build roads where we have to build concrete steps to allow you access halfway up that building. That's just nonsense. That's nonsense. Clearly it's all been restored at some point, so there's a lot of adding on that's happened, and a lot of refurbishing and all that sort of stuff, and there's a thing called the Victorian Restoration, like I've mentioned before in previous videos, that definitely, well, according to the history books anyway, definitely took part in the 1800s, and according to that narrative, it was religious buildings, so you know, houses of worship, places we call churches nowadays. Well, now we call them churches, but when you look at these constructions up close, clearly they weren't built as houses of worship originally. But again, that'll be things I'll be going into in more detail when I talk about it. But there's so many things. They're just my sort of favourites to always keep mentioning, because they're the ones that we encounter on a daily basis when we take, you know, when we step outside and we walk down the road, you know, just to buy groceries from the local shop or whatever it is we do. That's that they're the sort of bits of evidence and proof that you have that the storyline that we've been offered is false. Right? Now, what exactly happened before everything got restored and why and this, that and the other, I really don't know. That is pure speculation. You know, who was it who resided here before we were here? How did we even get here in the first instance? You know, the significance of World's Fairs, I have my thoughts on that. You know, that all happened in the mid-1800s. If anybody doesn't know about the World's Fairs, just look up, for example, 1851, the Crystal Palace World's Fair in London, and look at some of the constructions that were used to house that World's Fair, and ask yourself how, with the technology that we were allegedly capable of, was even the Crystal Palace building possible? You know, but anyway, I digress. Lots of thoughts around that. I think about this sort of topic pretty much every day, because at the end of the day, like I said, we have evidence of it the moment we step out of our door. That's just the way it is. But I'm walking back towards Bournemouth now. Yeah, on a day like today, yeah, I don't like to hold the camera in people's faces when they're walking towards me. It does look quite beautiful, this place. You know, throughout the whole year here in the Bournemouth area, you know, percentage-wise, we have quite a low percent of beautiful days. You know, I think I read a stat, I mentioned this in the previous video, of 365 days, this was a couple of years ago, I think it was 2022 or something like that. 365 days. We had 340 days where the sun didn't shine through, or we didn't have a sunny day, basically. Overcast at best, rain most normally. That takes us on to a totally different topic, doesn't it? But we won't go there now. But yeah, so that was really the purpose mainly of this video, was just to explain really why I know I talked about a few other bits there, but it's to explain really mainly why I'm not giving a presentation at the end of the month, because I know a few people have got in contact with me and asked me, you know, oh, what's going on? We saw a post online from Ian, basically advertising somebody else's appearance, and I was like, well, yeah, because of basically me seeing my daughter, and it clashes. While I'm at it, I want to thank Ian as well for his flexibility. I know he was sort of relying on it a bit, and but things do happen, and you know, him and I are good, and I've explained it a little bit, and yeah, I've just got to get my head around the fact that I will be seeing her, because that for me is a very, very, very big deal. You know, for those who are parenting on a daily basis, it won't be a thing for them to even worry about that sort of stuff. For me, it's huge. You know, talking to somebody like your daughter on the phone all the time, or even on FaceTime or whatever, is one thing, but having them there in person with you after such a long time, you know, the last time I saw her she was 8, and now she's a young woman, 15, is mind-blowing, and makes me very acutely aware of my responsibility. I'm looking forward to it. I'm embracing it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not worried, but it is a huge deal. But it will be good. I'm glad it's happening. And you know, all things happen for a reason. You know, the timing of stuff all happens for a reason. I do believe that. And here's another thing, by the way, invented in the 1800s. The postal service. The first stamp. They can argue about whether it's the penny black or the penny blue or the penny red, but I believe the penny black was the first ever postage stamp. And guess which monarch's head is depicted on it? Yep, Queen Victoria. So there we go. On that note, I hope I didn't waffle on too much, and I hope I made a little bit of sense. I will leave it there for now. I will see you all soon. Some of you, of course, much sooner. I'm always approachable. People can get in contact with me if you want to. You know, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Instagram's my name, Sven Pillay, all lowercase written together. And Facebook, I'm such an imaginative person, is also Sven Pillay, but written normally. Yeah, you know, so if there's anything you want to know or anything like that, then please do get in touch. Otherwise, speak to you all soon, and ta-ta for now.